So if you've been with us, we're talking First Samuel. The book of First Samuel is largely about three characters. It's about Samuel, it's about Saul, and it's about David. But today's story is going to take a little bit of a different twist to it. We're going to be talking about Jonathan. Jonathan is kind of a secondary character. He shows up in a bunch of different people's stories. But this time, he's going to be front and center. This is going to be a big thing. And man, let me tell you, as I went through this chapter this week, first off, I was looking at it thinking, this is a long chapter. I'm going to have to break it in two. And then I got reading it. I was like, you can't break it in two. This is a heartbreaking story that has to be brought all together all at once. And I was like, I would not be doing it justice. I would not be telling Jonathan's story correctly if I did not say it all. And it's funny because a lot of other pastors will actually just clump this into the David-Saul saga. This is just how David and Saul. But there's a character here who is going through something like a massive traumatic change is going on here. And let's get into it. Starting at verse 1, it says, "Then David fled from Naioth at Ramah and went to Jonathan and asked, 'What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he's trying to kill me?'" If you remember from last time, remember, David fled to Samuel and said, "Saul's gone crazy. He's trying to kill me. What will we do?" They went to Ramah, and Saul was so adamant he wanted to kill him, he sent 3 groups of hitmen, all of which began to be filled by the Holy Spirit and began to prophesy. Finally, Saul went to go do the deed himself, and even he couldn't overcome the Lord because the Lord is sovereign. The Lord reigns supreme. And then as all this is happening, because this is all the people that are trying to kill David are in this one place, David's like, well, I'm going to use this as my chance to get out. And so he does. He gets out because Saul's trying to kill him, and he goes to the one person that he trusts the most. That's his best friend, Jonathan. "Your father's trying to kill me." And look at Jonathan's response in verse 2. "Never," Jonathan replies, "you're not going to die." Now, last week we talked about how a man's only as good as his word. And we talked about the oath that Saul made with Jonathan. "As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death." And then immediately he betrayed his oath. But Jonathan doesn't yet know. Jonathan believes his father is a good man. He believes his father is a good king. And don't we all want to think that about the people in our lives that we trust? We put all of our faith, our trust, our hope in these individuals. We say, you know what, and it's funny because sometimes we don't even realize how much we've done it until a situation such as this. "Never," Jonathan replied. "You're not going to die. Look, my father doesn't do anything great or small without letting me know. Why would he hide this from me? Isn't it so?" Remember, Jonathan is the crown prince, and he's right. Whenever there was any sort of business that Saul would do, Jonathan was included because Jonathan was being raised up, trained up in order to take over the crown. It was going to be his kingdom next, right? Obviously, God had his other plans. We already know he's anointed David. But as far as Jonathan knows, he's the crown prince. He's going to inherit the kingdom. But David took an oath and said to him, "Your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes, and that he has said to himself, 'Jonathan must not know this, or he will be grieved. Yet as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, there's only a step between me and death.'" Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it for you." You got to imagine, right? He trusts his father completely, Jonathan. Jonathan trusts his father. And so Dad said he wouldn't kill David. So why would he do? David, I can understand. Dad tried to throw the spear at you, all this stuff. You're just being a bit paranoid, okay? That's in the past. We've put it behind us. I know it's a bit ridiculous to think, but it's in the past. Dad promised he wouldn't do it. He promised that you would live, David, and he trusts him. And so he's willing to humor David because his love for David, his love for his best friend, and his love for his father are at odds in this moment. And he's saying, look, I want to bring this all together because I don't want to have to choose sides. But at the same time, one of the things that we know about Jonathan and we see over and over and over about Jonathan is just. And Jonathan is willing to follow the truth of God, no matter what. And sometimes that's put him in very difficult positions. Remember before where he ate the honey and he said, Father, you made the oath, you have to kill me. And he wasn't willing to contest it. He said, look, if this is what's happened, I bear the responsibility, I bear the guilt. This is who Jonathan was. He was a good man. So David said in verse 5, look, tomorrow is the new moon feast, and I'm supposed to dine with the king. But let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow. And if your father misses me at all, tell him, David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. And if he says, very well, then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me. As for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord. And if I am guilty, then kill me yourself. Why hand me over to your father? Never, Jonathan said. If I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you? Again, Jonathan refuses to believe this. But he's willing to help David realize the error of his way, right? Because that's how Jonathan's thinking. David clearly has reason to be afraid. This guy's got it out for him. He keeps sending hit squads. He keeps trying to pin him to the wall himself. David's got a problem. But Jonathan wasn't around for that. Jonathan doesn't know that. Jonathan has been left completely unawares. And so he's like, you know what? If this is going to bring peace between you and my dad, then you know what? Yes, David, let's do this. So David asks, who will tell me if your father answers you harshly? Because David knows how this is going to go down. Come, Jonathan said, let's go out into the field. So they went out together. And Jonathan said to David, I swear by the Lord, the God of Israel, that I will surely sound out my father by this time the day after tomorrow. So in 2 days' time. If he is favorably disposed towards you, will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father intends you harm, may the Lord deal with Jonathan, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away in peace. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. Right? Jonathan thinks really highly of his dad. He's not seeing the signs. And many of us have relationships like this in our lives sometimes too. We don't see the signs of people and the toxicity that they have on us. And it can be really unfortunate where a lot of us are Jonathan in situation, or maybe you've been the Davids and they're trying to call it out and be like, excuse me, Jonathan, what's going on here? Hello, do you not see the evil things that he's doing? And sometimes it's like a willful blindness that we put on. We don't want to see it. Because, as we're going to read in this, what can we do about it? Right? What can Jonathan do about it if the king wants to kill David? There's nothing he can do. He's the king. Verse 14, but show me unfailing kindness like the Lord's kindness as long as I live, so that I may not be killed. And do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. And that is going to play a big role in 2 Samuel, that particular promise. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord call on David's enemies to account. And Jonathan and David reaffirmed his oath out of love for him, because he loved him as he loved himself. So then Jonathan said to David, tomorrow is the new moon feast. You will be missed because your seat will be empty. And the day after tomorrow, toward evening, go to the place where you hid when all this trouble began. Because remember, they already had that encounter where David was hiding. And so then Jonathan brought Saul out so that David could hear Saul make the oath. Right? It's not that David is unaware that Saul said these things. He knows. He just knows that he violated them. He knows that he lied. That he's allowed himself to become so fully and totally depraved that he would violate an oath that he made to God. Again, because as we talked about Saul right from the beginning, Saul was never the most pious of men. Saul was never one who looked and said, God, what can I do for you? It was always, what can I get from you? What can I get from God? What can I get from the people around me? This is the type of person Saul is. And these people are in great abundance in the world today. What can I get from you? The day after tomorrow evening, toward evening, I'll go to the place where he hid when the trouble began. Wait by the stone Ezel. I will shoot 3 arrows. Okay, so this is the sign. David, when all this is I will let you know. I promise you, I will not betray you. This is how I'll let you know. I'm going to shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, to the side of that stone, as though I were shooting at a target. Then I'll send a boy and say, go find the arrows. And if I say to him, look, the arrows are on this side of you, bring them here, then come, because as surely as the Lord lives, you are safe. There is no danger. But if I say to the boy, look, the arrows are beyond you, then you must go, because the Lord has sent you away. And about this matter you and I discussed, remember, the Lord is witness between you and me forever. So David hid in the field, and when the new moon feast came, the king sat down to eat. And he sat in his customary place by the wall opposite of Jonathan, and Abner sat next to Saul. But David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean. Surely he is unclean. But the next day, in the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. So then Saul said to his son Jonathan, why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal either yesterday or today? Jonathan answered, David earnestly asked me for, remember this is the plot that they made together, earnestly asked for permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, let me go because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town and my brother has ordered me to be there. And if I have found favor in your eyes, let me go away and see my brothers. That is why he has not come to the king's table. And immediately, all of Jonathan's worst fears are realized. Right? He's saying this fully expecting Dad's just going to be like, oh, that's fine. That's great. I'm glad he's serving the Lord. I'm glad David has been such a good servant to me. He's done all these wonderful things. But what happens? Instead, Saul's anger immediately flares up. This must be a rage. As much as I thought I understood what rage and anger must be, I can't imagine being as angry as Saul is in this moment because of things that are about to happen. I can't imagine. David must be living rent-free in his head all the time. He must be constantly thinking about David. Because his anger flares up at Jonathan, and he said to him, you don't say this you don't slander a person's mom like this, okay? You son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established, which is true. Now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die. That must have been shocking enough. Why'd you bring mom into this? I just told you what about David. What the heck, Dad? Why should he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan asked his father. But Saul hurled his spear at his son to kill him. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. So Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger, I can imagine. And on that second day of the feast, he did not eat because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David. Now, why is this substantial? Okay, there are the feasts that are laid out in the book of, in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. I think it's in the book of Exodus, but I may be wrong, but I think it is. But there's the feasts that were essentially mandatory. You had to go to these things. If you had the ability, you had to be at these feasts. But not only did you have to, almost everyone wanted to be, because when you live in a world such as they lived back then, any chance to go out and have a good, joyful party time, like this was a great time of joy. This was a great time of celebration. This is something that people looked forward to each and every year, was showing up to these feasts and these festivals. This was a great celebration of the Lord when they got together like this. And why is it significant that it's significant that Jonathan suddenly has this 180 attitude. It shows you the utter heartbreak, the betrayal, the trauma that Jonathan has received by what just happened. And if we're honest, each and every one of us kind of understands. I mean, it's so significant. I can't remember the guy's last name. The one that wrote, it's John something. He wrote the epic poem, A Divine Comedy. I don't know if any of you have ever read it. But if you haven't, to sum it up, most everything that the general pop culture knows about heaven and hell and angels and demons is actually from this poem. It has nothing to do with the Bible. It's, in fact, famously, a section of the poem is called Dante's Inferno, which you've probably heard of before. And it talks about how the lowest level of hell is reserved for betrayers. Because isn't that true? One of the worst things that you could do to a person is betray them. Betray their trust, their faith that they placed in you. We were talking about it at the beginning, how messy and bitter divorce is. Because it's not just a separation. It's a betrayal. And it's harmful and hurtful and terrible. It's not something I would ever wish on anyone because it is not pleasant. It's horrible. Jonathan just had the worst wake-up call that one can imagine. It was brutal. The father that he loved, the father that he adored, wants to kill his best friend because he threatens his kingdom. Not for anything he's done, not for anything he said, not for any act of transgression against Saul, simply because the people love him more than they love Saul. He's a threat. They love him more, my son. Now I have to kill him. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for his meeting with David, and he had a small boy with him. He said to the boy, "Run and find the arrows that I shoot." And as the boy ran, he shot the arrow beyond him. And when the boy, can you imagine being that poor arrow boy? It says he shot beyond him, which makes me think that the boy is out there while he's shooting. I don't know if that's true, but either way, I wouldn't want that job. When the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called out after him, "Isn't the arrow beyond you?" Then he shouted, "Hurry! Go quickly! Don't stop!" What an attitude shift. He had this response. Isn't the arrow beyond you? Because he didn't intend to actually use it. It was never on Jonathan's mind that his father had fallen so far, that his father had become so evil. And yet, when he did have to use the phrase, he added all of that onto there. Hurry, go quickly, don't stop. Why? Because he loves his friend. And he can't believe what his father has become. Of course, the boy picked up the arrow. He returned to his master. The boy knew nothing about all of this. Only Jonathan and David knew. And then Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said, "Go, carry them back to town." And after the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone, and he bowed before Jonathan 3 times. With his face to the ground, they kissed each other and wept, but David wept the most. I'm sure David in that moment knew he wasn't going to be able to grace his friend's presence ever again. This brother to him. That's it. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever.'" So then David left, and Jonathan went back to town. 2 big takeaways here. Number 1, both of these men have so much respect for God, care so much for God, that despite the Lord's anointed trying to kill both of them, acting in such a despicable manner, they realize vengeance is God's, not mine. Jonathan also recognizes his station and his place in the world. He recognizes that he can't just run off with David to go live like outlaws out in the middle of nowhere. David, you need to be safe. David, you owe nothing to my father. David, be gone. But we're not going to trade evil for evil. He remains devoted to God. And he knows his place. He's trusting in the Lord, and he remembers this for his people. See, both David and Jonathan, and I've brought this question up before, but they both repeat it here again. It's not what can I get from God, because that's why most people come to church. God, my life is hard. God, things are going wrong. God, I need this. I need this. God, I want this. God, I need this. God, I want to pray for this because I need this and I want this. And I want to keep pushing the vending machine buttons on God and just getting what I want. Instead of asking, God, what can I do for you? That's what we see both of these men doing right here. Jonathan saying, how can I serve God in this horrible position that I'm in, where my father betrayed my trust? He betrayed the people that were closest to him. He betrayed those that served him well. He's betrayed those that God has put in favor. I know how I can serve God. I'm going to continue to serve the Lord's anointed. I'm going to continue to be faithful to my mission, to God, to my oath, to what I've promised, to what I have committed to, despite the evil that Saul's done. See, Jonathan never leaves Saul's side. He sticks with him right to the end, because he recognizes, I'm not going to trade evil for evil. I'm not going to go down to the level that my father has gone to. Instead, I'm going to remain true and steadfast the entire way through. And so does David. See, both of them right here have the perfect reason to start a coup. Rise up against Saul. Take him down. The people love David. People love Jonathan. Jonathan and David are these two great leaders in all of Israel. I mean, you can imagine if Saul's commanders and generals have been seeing his behavior lately, seeing how he's treating those whom he once trusted. You can imagine their faith in Saul's a little bit waning too. Well, maybe we wouldn't mind a little change in king. But that's not who they are, because they're not asking God, what can I get from you? They're saying, God, how can I serve you? What is it that I need to do? And they probably are very familiar with the words that the angel spoke to Joshua as they entered the promised land, right? Be strong and courageous in the face of your enemies, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. David knows that he's been chosen for a mission. It's no secret to him when Samuel showed up and anointed him in oil. He knows that God has a plan for him. He just needs to be strong and courageous. He needs to continue to serve God, remain steadfast in the ways of God. And although Jonathan, the tragedy of events are going to mean that he doesn't get to see Israel brought to its prosperity, it's because of his faithfulness to God. His steadfastness to the Lord's anointed, even one who fell away from grace. It's his faithfulness, Jonathan's commitment to justice, Jonathan's commitment to devotion to God, understanding his place, understanding his role, understanding what it is that he had to do, and understanding that it was about service, not about receiving. That David became king and Israel became what it did. That Israel became that golden jewel in the Middle East. What can I get from God? It's the wrong question. When all of your enemies come against you, when you're at your worst point, when people around you have betrayed you, when trust has been violated, when a covenant has been broken, when everything feels like it's falling apart and your whole life is in shambles, the question you need to be asking yourself isn't, God, send help. It's, God, what can I do for you? Do you think Jonathan felt up to that at that moment? And yet that's who he was. I'm sure Jonathan would have loved just another day of just, you know what, I need to be alone. I need to get away from this. I can't deal with this right now. This is too much. But they continue to ask, what can I do for you, God?